A national media expert still thinks Kyle Whittingham is one of the 10 best coaches in the sport. Is he right? And is Kyle Whittingham the best coach in the Big 12? We're breaking it down on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to the show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with everyone in the YouTube comments. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel has you covered because customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department, and I'm excited to be joined on today's show by Max Chadwick of PFF, host of their college football show. And Max, Kyle Whittingham is coming off a down year, but that doesn't mean that everyone is down on Kyle Whittingham. As we saw recently, Andy Staples and his co-host Ari Wasserman put out their top 25 college football coaches, part of the On3 network. Ari still had Kyle Whittingham as a top 10 coach. He had him 9th. Andy had Kyle Whittingham all the way down at 14th. So it poses the question, is Kyle Whittingham still a top 10 coach in the sport? And even though this is Locked On Utes, I got to say no right now. I don't think he is. I still think he's a top 15 coach. I think some of Utah, he's still a really good coach. And we'll talk about in the moment, is he the best in the Big 12? But some of Utah's issues, him not changing and adapting, are on him. And that's enough to me. Utah coming off being below 500, to me, that is enough of a reason to knock him outside of the top 10. So I actually wouldn't have him as a top 10 coach in the sport currently. How would you have him?
Yeah, I think when I did my coach rankings last year, I think I had him like back half of the top 10. And I think it's fair to bump him into that top 15 range, like you were just mentioning before. I think that's probably around where I'd have him, somewhere from 11 to 15, I would probably say. I'd be weary of dropping him too much lower than that, though, because, they went 5-7 this year, which obviously for Utah is something they haven't done in a long time, having losing seasons. But a lot of it was quarterback injury luck. I mean, what they happened at, and not only quarterback, I mean, almost the entire team. They were one of the most had one of the worst luck in terms of injuries in the entire sport, honestly. So I think that was a huge reason why they had such a disappointing year this past year. But I mean, you only got to look back at what he's done in previous years at Utah to see how good of a coach he was. I mean, he brought him to back-to-back Rose Bowls, won back-to-back Pac-12 titles. They've always been, an 8, 9, 10-win team with him as head coach. Essentially, like I said, they have not had a losing record since 2013, so 11 years ago with him as the head coach. So he's done a phenomenal job at Utah. And listen, Utah's not a powerhouse like, say, an Ohio State or a Texas or a Georgia, where it's really hard for them to have a down year or a losing season because of just how good the program is resource-wise. Utah's not like that, right? So he has really have them overperform in terms of what they have in terms of resources. So he's still absolutely one of the best coaches in the country. I think that's the thing, too, with these coach rankings, honestly, JT, that I think people need to understand with them is that it's not just, hey, this guy won the national title, this guy won the national title, this guy is always, top 5 every year in his team. It's not just that, because that's how you kind of rank NFL coaches. I think it's fair to do that for NFL coaches. College football is a way different sport because not all programs are created equal. At the NFL, everyone gets basically the same amount of draft picks, the same amount of cap space. College football is not like that. It's very, very uneven in terms of the resources that each of these programs have. So when you make these coach rankings, you got to keep in mind, like, okay, what is he doing with what he's got, right? I think that's a big thing to keep in mind with some of these coach rankings. And I think what Kyle Whittingham has done with what he's got at Utah is really remarkable, and why he's, in my opinion, a top 10 to 15 coach, even though Utah might not always be a top 10 to 15 team every year.
I totally agree. I don't think you could have him past 15 still. He'd be the only coach you probably have in the top 15 that is still just coming off of a losing season. And I do put some of the offensive issues and just some of the things that went wrong with this team. I do feel like some of that falls back on the head coach at the end, but we're only comparing him to the best in the sport. That's why in the narrowest of margins, he's going to fall a little bit to me outside of that top 10, but easily could be right back there this year and what could end up being his final year. So then we pose the question, if he isn't a top 10 coach in college football, maybe in your case, you said barely is he the best coach in the Big 12? And to that, I would say he's the second best coach in the Big 12. Maybe I'm a little high on this guy. I'm going to go Kenny Dillingham. I'm that impressed with what Kenny Dillingham is. I'm already bought in. I think his offensive creativity, Utah was picked first by many. They ended up being one of the worst. Kenny Dillingham took ASU from worst all the way up to first. I do not think this is a flash in the pan. Like I really like Deion Sanders, but I do think it's fair to say, hey, can Deion do it without his son being a game-changing quarterback, without Travis Hunter on the defensive side of the ball, who's one of the best players in recent memory, versus I feel like what Kenny Dillingham did is really just do it again, basically, as I get twisted up here. But yeah, I really like Kenny Dillingham. I would have him one for what he did last year. I think he's going to continue to do that. And then Whitt would be right behind him for me. How would you have it?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would probably still put Whitt number one right now, just because of the proven track record that he's had at Utah. And like I said, this past season, it'd be one thing if they were fully healthy and we're 5-7. I chalk up much of their struggles just to injury, right? And that's really hard. I mean, they're at one point, weren't they on like their fifth string quarterback at one point this year? Like, it's just insane what they've gone through injury wise, not only the quarterback but to their position. So because of that, I almost give this like a wash. This last year, a wash to Kyle Whittingham. And then Kenny Dillingham, as you mentioned, they were incredible this past year, and one of the biggest Cinderella stories of college football. Like, they were 3-9 in his first year as head coach. They were thought of as one of, if not the worst team in the Big 12 entering last year. Then they ended up winning the freaking conference and making it to the college football playoff quarterfinals and almost beating Texas in that quarterfinal round. Went to overtime with them. So it's incredible the turnaround he's had there. Then, listen, I know some people don't love Deion Sanders and Coach Prime at Colorado, but like, what he's done there is remarkable. I mean, they were a really down in the dumps program when he took it over. And yeah, you could say, oh, well, he got Shedeur Sanders and he got Travis Hunter and he got all these players to go in there, so that's why they were so good. Yeah, no duh. That's what his job is. Like, he completely rebuilt that roster, and he shouldn't be held against him, right? Getting a guy like Travis Hunter to go to Colorado, that should not be held against him. Like, that should be seen like, hey, that shows just the kind of recruiter he is, that these kids, these top kids, the Heisman Trophy winner wants to play for that guy and not for a more proven program, right? So that, I think, is a kind of a superpower that Deion Sanders has, that he's always going to convince these kids to come to his program and build it through the transfer portal and get these 5-star recruits. You got Jordan Seaton, you got Julian Lewis, the quarterback, coming in this year as well. That should not be held against him, right? I get it. Like, yeah, he did have superstar talent on his team, but the way he rebuilt it from a 1-11 program all the way to a 9-win team just 2 years later, that's insane. And I think that those three for me, and then also Matt Campbell, I probably put up there from Iowa State as well. He obviously led the Cyclones to their first 10-win season in program history this past year. They made it to the Big 12 title game. He is terrific. He's been a guy that NFL teams have been interviewing, it feels like, forever for their head coaching jobs. So that just shows you the kind of respect he has there. And it's another program, Iowa State, that's really not historically a very good football program. And Matt Campbell's had them competing at a pretty high level for a pretty long time. So coming off the best year ever in program history, I think Matt Campbell deserves to be in that conversation as well.
I think he does. I mean, when you start to go through the list of the coaches in this conference, I mean, there's a lot of really good coaches. You get the Lance Leipold's, we already mentioned Matt Campbell. Chris Kleinman is another one. I really like what he's been able to do. Kalani Sitake, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple others too that have been. I mean, we didn't even mention the one coach who recently, in Sonny Dykes, who led his team to the national championship. That shows you the overall depth of coaches in the conference. And I agree. Like I said, that was why Deion wouldn't be the best to me, is I just want to see him do it with the rest of the group. But I do believe he's absolutely in the conversation still for what he's done. He's a really good coach, and I'm excited to see what he can do this year, because I do think he's going to continue to be towards the top of the coaches in the conference. Just not sure if I'd have him as number one, but the turnaround he has had is in a lot of ways very similar to what Kenny Dillingham did. Just couldn't quite reach the top like ASU was able to do last year. So we both really like Kyle Whittingham. We both like this Utah team. But the question is then, can they answer the biggest questions next season that they have held them back from the previous year? And what are exactly those questions? Max Chadwick, member of Pro Football Focus, I'm going to be asking you exactly your biggest questions about this Utah team as a national media member. And we are going to be talking about this Utah team more in depth in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Factor. Factor has you covered, because with Factor, if you're looking to optimize your nutrition, Factor makes eating well easy with chef prep, dietitian approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and real to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's calorie smart, protein plus, or keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. Example, I recently tried their Protein Plus meals, and they were packed with flavor and kept me throughout the day. Convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smarter with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 off. Use code lockedoncollege50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code lockedoncollege50 off at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 off. All caps, no spaces, and that is 50, the number 50, not spelled 50, to get 50 off plus free shipping on your first box. You can head over and get started ordering your Factor meals today. All right, Max. Utah has been a polarizing figure already again this offseason. ESPN's Bill Connelly predicted them to win the conference next year. Las Vegas had Utah and Kansas State at the top of their favorite list. I do think this Utah team's capable of bouncing back. I think as we sit here right now, they will be one of the top 4 teams in the Big 12 next year. Do I think they deserve to be ranked inside the top 4 right now? No, but history has shown us. I recently had this stat brought up. Max, no one outside of Texas and Oklahoma has made the Big 12 championship in back-to-back years since Colorado did it in 04 and 05. So this is the ultimate just crazy conference of parity. So I do think teams like Utah and Kansas could be in for big bounce-back seasons, how they fared in one-score games a year ago, because we often see a flip there. Where would you currently have Utah right now in your Big 12 power rankings?
Oh, good question. I actually put up my Wistrcill top 25 about a month ago. So let's see where I remember I had Arizona State pretty high up there. I had Arizona State number 13 in that ranking. So they're going to be very good again. I know they lost Cam Scadaboo, who's their lifeblood of the entire program. But like you said, Kenny Dillingham's a great coach. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the country going into next year in Sam Levitt, one of the best receivers in the country, Jordan Tyson as well. Coming back. So I'd probably say Arizona State. I think BYU is returning a lot of talent. I think BYU, they had an incredible year this past year, going to 11-2. They bring back basically almost the entire team. Not a lot of guys are leaving from that BYU team. So I think they're worth somewhere in the top 25, in my opinion, as well. So probably BYU is up there. Kansas State's going to be up there, with guys like Avery Johnson, continue to develop at quarterback. Chris Kleiman, we didn't mention him before, but he's a great coach as well in the conference. And then Austin Romaine, I think, is one of the best linebackers in college football. So he's up there. Kansas State's up there. Iowa State, I think, is going to be up there as well. They do lose some talent, and I'm worried about what they could do with just Rocco Becht at quarterback, because Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel are both gone. So I put them up there as well. So, yeah, maybe not top 4 initially for me, but, like, Utah is definitely in that mix. And I think, expecting them to have a bounce-back year with some really, really talented players returning and coming into that program, I think it's fair to say. So, yeah, I think Utah is probably a top 5 or so team, I would say, in the Big 12 right now.
Yeah, I feel like they're right there. They have a lot of pieces that could lead to them bouncing back. We could say that about several Big 12 teams, though, and all these teams still have their question marks. So, Max, I am curious, as you cover all of college football from a national media perspective, what are your biggest questions right now about why Utah wouldn't win the Big 12 next year? Like, what holds them back in your view right now?
Yeah, I think, one, I'm really excited about Devin Dampier coming into that program. But you want to see a jump because obviously Utah had the worst passing grade in the Power 4 last year. So that's a big reason why they were held back. And like I said before, it's all because of the injuries at quarterback position. But that's a big part of it. I think they got to get more out of the run game as well. They really didn't run the ball that effectively. They had the 14th worst rushing grade last year. Now they do add a guy in Wayshawn Parker from Washington State that I think will be a guy that could really help out the run game this year. I do like the offensive line. I think Spencer Fano is one of the best, maybe the best offensive lineman we have coming back to college football. I mean, he is phenomenal. So and the defense is always going to play well, right? With Kyle Whittingham there and then what they do there. So I just think these skill position players is what I'm really looking at for Utah, and they need to improve that definitely next year. So that's where I'm looking at, is just can they get more out of the run game in terms of the running backs? I think the offensive line will do a good job blocking for them, and then can they get more out of the pass rush? Maybe I think that's another big thing as well. So can Devin Dampier come in from New Mexico and show that he's, a power 4 quarterback and play at the level he did last year? I think he can. And then also, can they get more out of the run game with guys like Wayshawn Parker getting in there too?
I want to get to a lot of what you said there, but I thought you said something really interesting about Spencer Fano. Do you think if we're projecting a year from now, you're getting ready to go off and cover the NFL Combine, do you expect Spencer Fano to be there next year? Way too early?
I think he can. I think the thing about him, is that I don't think he plays right tackle for Utah. I do not think he's a right tackle or he's an offensive tackle in the NFL. I think he's going to have to kick inside to guard. I know that's where he was recruited at coming out of high school, was an interior offensive lineman. That's where he was listed at least. And then when you watch his tape, you could tell, right? He's not the biggest. He doesn't have the longest arms. I just think he's not the length that teams are going to covet at tackle. That does not take away from the fact that he's a phenomenal football player, right? And I think that he's definitely going to be one of the top probably interior offensive linemen in next year's draft, which is still very valuable. I would not be surprised, and I probably will have him as a first-round prospect in next year's draft going into next year. Like I said, he was that good this year. There's still some work to be done as a pass blocker, but in terms of the run game, I mean, he is a road grader. I mean, he might be the best run blocker in college football right now. So I think Spencer Fano definitely could be a first-round pick next year. I just don't think he's going to stick at tackle in the NFL. I think he'll have to kick inside the guard.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense because of the length and some of those things. And, when he was at left tackle 2 years ago, only a true freshman, and that's really tough as an offensive lineman to play. He struggled at left tackle, had a really good season at right tackle, but only bigger and stronger in the NFL. So could make a lot of sense if he has to kick in the guard, but it's just really exciting that Utah has such an elite protector at tackle still, especially for the collegiate level, as we mentioned. Going back to the questions and things you posted, this is why Kyle Whittingham, no matter how you rank him, has to still be in a top 15 to me, because you got so far down the list until you got to defensive questions about Utah. It's just like, hey, it's Kyle Whittingham, it's a Utah defense. So Morgan Scalley, we know this defense is going to be good. And they do need to get more pass rush. They lost 2 of their top 3 defensive ends from a year ago. You get Logan Fano, Spencer Fano's brother, back on the defensive side, but need a little bit more from the pass rush for sure. But yeah, on the offensive side, it's the least inspiring on paper right now, probably position group Utah has is their wide receivers. There's some guys in Otto Tia who you hope can break out, but what does that look like? We have to wait and see there. We're still waiting on Dorian Singer to try and get another year of eligibility, but the longer that goes on, the more I don't know if that's going to end up working out. And yeah, you need to, all 5 starters are back, but you need to be better at run blocking for sure, and a more balanced offense. Now, Devin Dampier is going to help out with that a lot, but there is always a question. Anytime you get a group of 5 guy making the jump to the power 4, is he ready to make that jump? I think he is, based on his production. I feel like he was trending upward. He's only going into his junior season, led the 4th best offense in the country, back with his offensive coordinator who did that. I feel like he's ready to take on power 4 defenses. Do you, Max Chadwick?
Yeah, I listen, like I said, he is an electric player. I think he improved a lot as a passer this past season, but there's still some work to be done there. I think as a runner, he's one of the top dual threat quarterbacks we have in college football right now. Now, he's not the biggest, right? He's about 5'10", 200 pounds, but he is, like I said, he clocked in over 22 miles per hour in our GPS tracking at one point this year in New Mexico. So he is extremely fast at quarterback. So that's some speed that you see from wide receivers and corners right now, right? So he is a phenomenal athlete. He will add a lot to that run game. That's another thing too, is like, one of my questions was, what is Utah going to have with Mekhi Bernard now gone in that running back room? Devin Dampier is going to help out with that, right? They're going to have an option run game. They just didn't really have that much last year with their quarterback. So again, progressing as a passer is going to be big for him, especially as he goes up to the Big 12 level. But there's a lot to like with Devin Dampier, and I am very excited about what he can do at Utah next year. And I think he could be one of the biggest breakout stars in college football.
Totally agree. Really excited to see what he could do. Max, do you know who led college football in yards per carry last year?
Was it Mekhi Bernard?
It was actually Devin Dampier.
Oh, that makes sense. There we go.
Good running it. Obviously very different. I think Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame was second. So obviously different with the quarterback, but only sacked 4 times. He absolutely has to be. Dampier is definitely one of the biggest questions about this team. Can he actually do it? But there's a lot of reason to believe that he can. So really excited to see. What were you going to say, Max?
I was going to say, I'm looking at right now, like 1,200 rushing yards last year. And here at PFF, we don't count sacks like the actual statistics do for rushing yards. We think it's BS, as many people do. So in terms of when he actually ran the ball, he had 1,200 rushing yards last year. That's insane for a quarterback. So yeah, he is absolutely going to be one of the most electric quarterbacks in college football going into next year.
Did a lot of positive things against the best teams he played, that being in Auburn and Arizona. Ended the year without an interception through his final 3 games, including beating a Washington State team where he now gets Wayshawn Parker in the backfield with him too. So really excited to see what this Utah team can do in 2025. Speaking of 2025, Max is going to head next week to Indy and cover the NFL Combine, where Utah Utes former defensive tackle Junior Tafuna will be in action. We're talking about Tafuna as well as some of the other draftable Utah football players in one moment. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better way to get into it than on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off, you want to be on that fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Don't forget about college basketball going on too. Got NHL, MLB around the corner. FanDuel has you covered today. All right, Max Chadwick back with me here. Max, you're getting ready to head to the NFL Scouting Combine, but one of the reasons that a Utah player is going to be at the NFL Scouting Combine is going back to the Senior Bowl. And that was something I know you were at recently as well, too. Junior Tafuna had himself a heck of a week down in Mobile. What did you see from Tafuna, and what do you expect to see from him at the Combine?
He was really good. He turned a lot of heads, and I know there's a lot of people that maybe didn't watch college football as much in terms that were at the Senior Bowl, and just they're saying, "Who's this Utah guy?" Right? Because he was turning heads, like you said. And we actually here at PFF we grade the Senior Bowl, we grade the practices, and we grade the game. And Junior Tafuna was the 4th highest graded defensive tackle in attendance at the Senior Bowl. Right? So he was really really good. The only guys above him were Darius Alexander, who was phenomenal, the Toledo guy. He really made a lot of money at the Senior Bowl. And then Walter Nolan obviously is going to be a first-round pick probably. And then Ty Robinson from Nebraska had a really good week as well. Those are the only 3 that were above Junior Tafuna in terms of PFF grade at the Senior Bowl, both in practices and at the game. So Tafuna had a really good week. We have him as a 6th-round prospect right now. You might be moving up from that. He had a good year at Utah this past year as well. So, yeah, he was really, really good. And I think he made himself a good amount of money at the Senior Bowl.
That's the hope. I'm curious how he'll test at everything. I think he does a lot of things very well with the pads on, but is he a guy that's going to have the fastest 40 and the things of that nature? I don't know about that, but either way, his tape speaks for itself, and especially having a big week at the Senior Bowl means a lot. Max, you mentioned Junior Tafuna. You have him as a 6th-round grade. I have a couple other guys in mind that I believe will be drafted for Utah, but I want to start with you. Who are the other players that when I say Utah Utes drafted in 2025 or right around that range, drafted, undrafted, that stand out?
Yeah, I think Lander Barton is probably the top guy right now.
Well,
I would say
Lander is coming back, actually.
Oh, he is. Okay, well, then I'm looking right now at the consensus board, and he was listed as a 4th-round prospect. So that's big for Utah that he's coming back. Kenny Reed, I know, is leaving. I think that's the guy that could because I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He's a guy that actually could get drafted somewhere late day 3. So yeah, I think probably 6th, 7th round for Kenny Reed right there. Like I said, Junior Tafuna. Brandon Keithy's tough, man. I love Brandon Keithy. It's just the size and the injury history is going to scare a lot of teams in the NFL draft. I don't know if he will get drafted, honestly, but he could be a top priority free agent. So that's another guy as well. So yeah, I think those are some of the guys I would put out there right there. It is big that Landon Barnes going back though, because I think that was a guy that I do remember talking to some people in the NFL circles that they did like Lander Barton coming out if he was to come out. So the fact that he's coming back, he should be one of the top linebackers in college football going into next year then.
It's amazing. I just did a quick Google search, the amount of draft profiles that are already out on Lander Barton, because I knew he had a lot of hype coming into this season. There were a lot of people who were hoping that he probably would declare. I thought he had a little bit of a down year for his standards, so I think it was smart of him to come back. So you said Lander. I was researching that real quick. So run through again the guys that you said. Do you think Utah will have to get drafted?
I think Leonard would have been one of the guys. Kenny Reed could get drafted, and then Brandon Keithy's a tough one. Like I don't know if he will with the injury history and the size. It's just they're big outliers, both of those. But other than that, I think Junior Tafuna obviously is probably gonna get drafted now after the great week at the Senior Bowl, and then I think Kenny Reed could be a guy that could get drafted as well.
Yeah, I'm curious if a guy like Zemiah Vaughn, who I think has the physical profile of an NFL corner, but he's coming off a down year, and I'm curious what the NFL will think of that. I think another guy that's very interesting is a Connor O'Toole. When you look at his measurements, they get people really excited. He has a tough injury history, though, and the production isn't all there because of that injury history. He's flashed some good things, but how will teams grade him out medically too? Alakai Gilman is probably going to go undrafted. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see how many Utes end up getting drafted. There was 5 a season ago. They very well could be hard pressed to meet that number. I mean, there's a lot of talented college football players out there. So I'm curious to see what that final number will end up looking like, and really hoping Tafuna has himself a day at the combine. And there's always some surprises too. Devon Vele was drafted in the 7th round by the Broncos. Everyone was like, oh, and then he ends up producing as a rookie. So I'm very intrigued how this NFL draft season will play out for Utah. And Max, we are just beginning the NFL draft season, and college football off season, still a lot to be discussed too. Where should everyone head over if they want to find more of your content?
Yeah, it's all available at PFF. So at pff.com, I actually just starting today, honestly, have my top 10 returning players at every position list coming out. And tackles should be coming out shortly, either next week or the week after. And I could promise you right there, Spencer Fano, if not number 1, is going to be very high up on that list. So he will be on that, and probably maybe some other Utah players be on it. Maybe Leonard Barton might be on the top linebackers list now that I know he's coming back. So it's all available at pff.com, and also the PFF College Football Show on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. We're right now doing some NFL draft rankings, some other college football stuff as well. So yeah, check out the PFF College Football Show on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts.
Max, you're the best. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks, JT.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back next week talking the latest in Utah football and Utah athletics. We hope to see you then.